Very good evening to all of you. On behalf of Auditing and Assurance Standard Board of Institute of Chartered Accountant of India, I welcome you all in today's third CP program organized by AASB of ICI this year. Second webinar, we have already conducted one physical program this year, as well as this is today's second webinar of this council. And again, the topic is very important, that is the Standards on Quality Control, SQC1, and Quality Control for an Audit of Financial Statements, SA220. And in order to tackle this two standards, we are having with us our eminent speaker, CA Padma Shri Kestoji. So on behalf of AASB of ICI, I extend my warm welcome to you, ma'am. Namaste and welcome to you on this third CP program organized by AASB of ICI. We are having with us our Honorable Vice Chairman, CA Vishal Doshi ji, as well as the Chairman of Board of Studies. So I extend my warm welcome to you, sir. So before we formally start our today's webinar, I request our Honorable Vice Chairman, AASB, to please deliver his opening key remarks. Over to you, Vice Chairman, sir. Please.
Thank you very much, Anilji, and a very good afternoon to Padma Shri and all the participants who have joined on this virtual platform on this webinar. Friends, as you are aware, last year also in the AASB, we have done almost 131 programs. And the whole objective is not a count of the number of programs, but the efforts that at AASB we are undertaking with the eminent faculties and the speakers to ensure that the standards, the auditing standards, the assurance standards, typically members are aware about the various provisions, as well as also the faculties have been deliberating on how they can be implemented. And again, I would say especially by the small and medium practitioners. Taking this initiative forward this year also, we have started immediately after taking over the, or I would say we have continued from the previous year, the knowledge sharing activities or the initiatives from the AASB committee. And today we have the topics on the standards on the audit quality, that is the SQC1 and SA220. And friends, I would say that audit quality is something which everybody is looking for. And everybody is wanting to strive for excellence as far as the quality is concerned. I would relate that wherever we also go, be it any product or service, we are also equally concerned about the quality of them. And I think similarly, when it comes to the assurance service, our clients, or I would say our stakeholders, are also equally concerned about the qualitative aspect of the audits. And we have very eminent speaker and somebody who is very well known and is always willing to contribute for the institute's activity. CA Padma Shri Krasto, who is going to take us through. And friends, I would request you earnestly that please look into the aspects that are there with respect to the quality, the audit quality, the standards that are there. And please ensure that you are able to implement them, maybe in parts, in pieces, but at least keep a target that you are able to achieve the maximum within a given time frame. And this becomes very important for all of us under the audit practice, or I would say as chartered accountants. So without taking much time, I once again thank all of you who are present over here to listen to this, I would say, very important topic on the audit quality, and my best wishes to all of you and a happy learning. Thank you, and over to you, Padma Shri. Or Anilji, back to you, sorry.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom. Before we formally start our today's webinar, it is our proud privilege to share with all the members of today's webinar to formally apprise them with the today's learner speakers brief profile. Padma Shri ji is a partner with Audit and Assurance Practice at MSKC and Associates. She operates her Mumbai office and has over 18 years of vast and extensive experience in practice audit services across industry vertical of insurance, financial services, and manufacturing. She is in charge of keeping the audit team well informed of the latest technical developments in various statutes and regulators, preparation of certain publications for internal as well as the external use. She also does the standardization of various reports, templates, working papers for the purpose of the audit. She is also responsible for the quality assurance function in the audit and assurance services, which technically includes review of deliverables, conduct of online review, code review of the audit files, and in charge of the implementation of ISQM. She is responsible for the coordination and conduct of all regulatory reviews, and she possesses in-depth knowledge of standards on auditing, both internal and external, as well as international quality standards, methodology, IFRS, company law, accounting standards, Ind AS, IPO-related matters, and other statutes. Also possess expert knowledge of audit tools. She is a Bachelor of Commerce from the Mumbai University, Chartered Accountant, Bachelor of Law, and she is having a diploma in system audit. As far as the experience is concerned, she is having vast experience in the insurance sector, financial services, IT, ITES, manufacturing, and is her area of expertise is technical support, quality assurance, risk management, statutory tax audit reviews, etc. Still, list is vast. So, without much wasting much more time, I request our learned guest speaker, CA Padma Shri Kestoji, to please deliberate on both these standards on auditing. Over to you, ma'am, please.
Thank you so much, Anil ji. Thank you so much, Vishal sir, for providing the opportunity. And I think audit quality, as you mentioned, is of such prime importance in today's requirement. Just give me 1 second. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the interruption. So I think audit quality is of such importance that anywhere, everywhere, people are just talking about, and every regulator wants only audit that is qualitative audit. Done at the times with it's just an audit opinion. If it is not a qualitative audit, I think no one is actually looking towards the requirement. So in that regard, the base standard or the I can say the evaluatory mother standard of all the standards, which is SQC1, based on which all other standards of auditing imbibe quality, as well as the procedures that will be set for the firm. That is something that we are going to discuss. So just to make it interactive, I would throw up some questions for understanding, as well as my understanding enriching, as well as to make it more interactive. So request you all to maybe participate through your answers being typed in chat. If that is okay with everyone, we will wait for maybe 5-10 seconds for a few of the questions, so that it becomes more practical and not theoretical. So coming to SQC1, what is SQC1? SQC1 is the quality control for all the firms. Which firms? All types of firms that perform audit as well as review of historical financial information and all assurance and related service engagement. So if we are performing if we are performing audit of any historical financial information, or providing any assurance services or any related service engagements, then that is SRS SA. If we are doing any services in this regard, then obviously SQC1 is something that is applicable. This is the table of control, the content. Basically, we are going to discuss about each and every element, or the 6 elements of SQC1, and then we will see the difference between SQC and SA220. So before we embark on the journey, let me put it this way, that SQC1 is basically something that is applicable to the firm. As we said, that what is it applicable to? If we are doing an audit, or if you are providing any kind of review services, then SQC1 is but obviously applicable. That's point number 1. So what does it deal with? It deals with the quality control function of the firm itself. So what are the things that the firm has to maintain so that the quality control of the firm is well built? What is SA220 then? SA220 is a miniature or a micro replication of SQC1. So if you understand SQC1, that is at the firm level, which is applicable to all engagements. And SA220 is nothing but something that will be applicable to each and every engagement. It will not be restricted to one engagement, but it will be applicable to each and every engagement. So if you actually compare SQC1 as well as SA220, you won't find much differences, but the differences would be basically SQC1 is at firm level, And SA 220 talks about engagement levels. So we will go ahead and see few of the examples as to what we are discussing. So I've explained the SQC1 very much in detail through this presentation. Haven't reiterated SA 220 and have only mapped the differences between SA 220 and SQC1. So let's go through what is the purpose. Purpose, as Vishal sir rightly mentioned, and in the initial, I think, talk, Sanilji also mentioned, something that is purpose is audit quality. Audit quality, how do we achieve audit quality? Because we are not selling a product here, we are selling a service here. Any work that is not done with quality is as good as not done. So we are looking at something that is actually qualitatively useful for us and which is actually speaks of itself in a certain manner. So if we have to ensure that the quality is right, then we have to ensure that certain quality checks are in place. So that is the purpose of establishing this standard. So whoever is doing an audit or providing an assurance service or providing any kind of SRS, that is the review services, then they have to comply with this standard without fail. So that's the purpose with which this is drawn, basically. Okay. What are the elements of systems of quality control? There are 6 elements of this system of quality control. Now, before we go ahead, just to inform and just to update everyone, there is another standard that has come up internationally, which is ISQM, which is now standard of quality management. So this is standard of quality control, and we have another standard which has got ISQM. So what is ISQM? ISQM is elaboration of SQC1. So it has 2 more pillars. We call pillars in ISQM and we call elements in SQC1. So let us talk more about SQC1. So we have 6 elements of SQC1. So it's a step-by-step approach. What are the things? So if we have to talk about SQC1, we have to think something similar to IFC framework, right? So what is IFC framework basically? IFC framework, we have that, COSO framework on the basis of which guidance note on IFC is drawn. We have various things in an IFC that first management will test, and then we will test and then provide an opinion and things like that. So think about all these things. So we are setting up a risk and control matrix basically for the firm itself, right? So that's point number 1 that we have to consider when we are looking at SQC1. It is like an internal control system for the firm itself. Okay. Now, what is it? How do I build a system of quality control? Let's dwell upon it for a few minutes. Every firm will have policies and procedures. So one of the things that I would like to state here is that many of us do a lot of things. Its operating effectiveness is there, but then design and implementation may be weaker. Why do I say that? We may not have a written policy, but we know how to deal with a certain requirement. For example, in one of the paras, it is written that you should have a complaints and allegation procedure to deal with complaints and allegation. So someone complains against you. You are not going to sit quiet. You are going to take action, and you know what to do, whom to consult, whom to speak to in the firm. If there are 20 people in the firm, or if there are 200 people in the firm, you know for sure whom to contact if there is a complaint or if there is a regulatory review. So you have so many things in place, but then maybe you don't have a written procedure which will say that, okay, in case of problem, go here, go there. So that is the missing link, which one has to actually update. Let us talk about how do I write the policies and procedures. So please start off with implementation guide on SQC1. There are draft policies that are provided in the appendix. Now, what was the date of applicability of SQC? It was 2009. So we are talking about something that is existing from 2009. Okay, there are policy drafts that are available in SQC in SQC1 implementation guide. So we can make use of it and we can start off from there. Let us understand each of these pillars. So the 6 pillars of SQC1 is leadership responsibility for quality, which is nothing but tone at the top. We will dwell upon each of these things a little bit more in detail. Ethical requirements. So we all are bound by code of ethics and we all have to be ethically right at all the points in time. Acceptance and continuance of engagement, this is very critical, and we will have some interesting things here. Human resources, that's the necessity without which we cannot actually go ahead, and we all know that there is a huge talent crunch as well. Engagement performance, all said and done, you can have very good policies and procedures. How do you perform an engagement is much more important, because that talks about your quality, and that is the determinant of your quality at the end of the day. And monitoring, how do you monitor all these pieces? So all of us go through peer review, QRB, and various other reviews, right? So the checklist contains some 67, 68 questions. Now it has, like, the latest QRB and the peer review checklist has some 160 question, 120 questions or something, with 450 line items to fill in. And we do that. What are those questions? If you see and compare, these are the headers in those questionnaires. So basically, we are trying to prove that we are actually having a proper system of quality control, and that is what is required for the purpose of issuing a peer review certificate or a QRB. Okay. So QRB is based on overall firm level quality control, and then it comes down to the engagement level, that is looking at the SA220 level. Same is the case with peer review. It looks at the firm at a level. So it more focuses on firm level, because peer review is actually at the firm level, and then it goes on to engagement sampling, and then looking at those aspects that is implemented in the engagement. So that's how the system of quality control has to work. So elements of system of quality control, as we spoke about, one of the important things that SQC1 tells us is that the quality control procedures and policies should be documented and communicated to the firm's personnel. So as we said, there are a lot of things that we are doing, but maybe those things we are not writing it down. What am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to do a procedure policy writing based on implementation guide of SQC1, and then I'm supposed to communicate it to the firm's personnel. So if I write a very good policy, I know very good English, I can write a good policy, and then I have written it and kept it with myself, it's of no use, because it's only designed, there is no implementation. Unless I go and talk to my team to say that this is what is the policy and this is what you're supposed to do, it is of no use. So communication of the policy to all the personnel is very much important. And that communication has to describe what is the quality control policy and objectives, and they have what is it that they have designed, and what is it that each of the individual is supposed to carry out. One of the thing is that in addition, also the firm can recognize the importance of obtaining feedback on its quality control system from its personnel. So firm has to encourage the team to communicate its views or concerns on quality matters. That is another important thing that is supposed to be looked into. Many of us are aware that from 1st of April 2023, AQMM is going to be applicable. So audit quality maturity model. So if you look at the audit quality maturity model, it's nothing but evolution from the quality control, SQC itself. Elements of these have been picked up and have been made measurable. So then many of the things were intangible. So now there is a scoreboard, and then you get a max score, you get a minimum score, and if in every section, if all the 3 sections you're getting more than 75%, then you're going to be at level 4, which is your mature in quality, right? And if you are between 50 to 75%, you are in mid-level, and then below 50%, you have to think whether you want to do audit or otherwise. And if you're below that, then I think we should not think of doing audit, because there is a lot of things that we have to improve upon. So this is the basis. So when we are talking about building a 20-story building, then what is the importance of the foundation? Foundation is very, very important. So this is the foundation of the 20-story building, maybe 20 or 100-story building, whatever. If the foundation is not strong, then the building may not actually stand well. And that's why it's very, very important to build the foundation quite strong. And if you're building the policies and procedures based on SQC1, the foundation will be strong, so that it can withhold any kind of earthquake maybe. First element, leadership responsibilities for quality within the firm. Let me put out a question. You can answer on the chat box. Okay. So when we talk about leadership responsibilities for qualities within the firm, there are a few things that are already written here. We will discuss that. What do you think is the importance of tone at the top? If tone at the top is good, is everyone going to be a follower of good tone at the top? Is tone at the top? So basically the question is, do you think tone at the top is important? Right tone at the top is important. Is right tone at the top important? Can we have some answers in the chat box, please? Waiting for 10 seconds. Yeah. So got few answers to me that says that yes, it is important. If there is right tone at the top, then everything becomes easier, right? So one of the things that we have to understand is that setting the right tone at the top is very much important. Who has to be the in charge of quality control? So the managing partner or the senior most partner or a person who is designated to be the head of the quality control is someone who has to actually head the quality. Okay, so if they speak appropriately and if the firm's leadership is appropriate, then that is something that they can influence the culture within a firm. So what is the meaning of tone at the top? So basically there has to be someone who is responsible for quality, and that person actually has to drive the quality appropriately so that the actually firm's quality is appropriately driven. And if there are any failures in the quality, that person is responsible to even actually punish or even actually take some disciplinary action within the firm. So this policy has to be incorporated. So there has to be a quality policy which has to be appropriately incorporated, and that has to be provided in the firm's internal documentation. The training material, partner and staff appraisals, everything will depend upon how well they all can actually achieve quality. Okay, so this actually needs the business leadership, the firm's leadership, to recognize that business strategy is subject to quality and business decisions are not about quality. What does that mean? That means quality cannot be compromised for money. Even if we have accepted a audit for example at a lower fees, but only because we have accepted at lower fees, we cannot give away quality. We have to actually have appropriate quality at all times. So as we know, accounting standards have level 1, 2, 3, and Ind AS have different applicability based on turnover. But the auditing standards do not have level 1, 2, 3. All auditing standards, subject to certain variations, are always applicable to everyone, right? So that's very important to understand that how business strategy cannot override quality. The persons who are assigned with additional operational responsibility for SQC has to have sufficient experience and ability and necessary authority to assume that responsibility. It's not that anyone can be made head of quality. The said person has to have adequate responsibility, authority, and then he has to ensure that everything is appropriately working. So that's his actually the role. The firm also has to devote sufficient resources for development, documentation, and support of its SQC. We also have some of the firms which are actually having a dedicated quality team who looks into all the matters relating to quality, who actually look into regulatory things and things, matters like that. So it is necessary that the firm spends some amount of resources, time, and availability of some people to ensure compliance with quality. Also, the firm's policies with respect to performance evaluation, compensation, promotion, all these things are actually related to the commitment towards quality. So if someone is doing good job, maybe he is appraised and then he is rewarded. And if someone is actually giving bad quality, then that person has to be reprimanded or taken some action against and things like that. So that's how it works, and that's how it has to work, and that is the importance of the tone at the top, or the leadership responsibility for quality within the firm. Let's come to ethical requirements. What's ethical requirement? Ethical requirement is very important. If ethical requirements, what is ethical requirements? So basically, code of ethics is something that is applicable to us. We are bound by Companies Act, basically, and also relevant professional standards. Code of ethics is one more important thing that will be applicable to us. So it's not only about independence, but it is about ethics, doing the right thing the right way, right? What does this element require? So this requires that the firm has to establish policies and procedures to enable that the firm and its personnel, so not only those partners but every staff, comply with ethical requirements. Firms' policies have to emphasize fundamental ethical principles as per ICI Code of Ethics, which actually comprises of integrity, objectivity, professional competence, and due care, confidentiality, and professional behavior. And those are reinforced by firm leadership, adequate education and training, monitoring, and process for dealing with non-compliance. Let's look at this. So what is ethical requirement? So you will have to, so if you see the peer review questionnaire, for example, or the QRB questionnaire, it says that whether the firm has an independence policy. So first of all, you have to drop an independence policy. What will be the elements of independence policy? Basically, you will have to define as to how you are looking into the independence at large at the firm level. That's point number one. Second, how do you actually evaluate conflicts of interest? Third, how do you document all your independence requirements? Fourth, do you have a practice of taking annual independence declarations from everyone, that is partner and staff, and also maybe few of them are also taking engagement-wise independence declaration. Okay, what are the contents of the independence declaration? So basically, it has to have simple, there's a format that is available in implementation guide of SQC1, which actually says that I do not have any direct financial interest with anyone. I do not have of any of the clients that I deal with. I do not indulge in any of the matters that will be actually where I will be auditing. I will not, none of my relatives are in key relationship, key managerial personnel, and various criteria like and ensuring that all the threats to independence are appropriately addressed. Also, in case of banking or insurance companies, there are some additional requirements which will have to be managed. So that kind of declaration is something that is necessary. Now, how is it emphasized? It is emphasized through the firm's leadership. So firm's leadership ensures that there is nothing that is actually otherwise. That is number one. Second is education and training. Now, this needs a lot of education and training because this is something that is relating to person to person, and this is something very it's not generic, but it is very niche, or it is very dedicated to few of the people. So continuous education on this matter as to how do you maintain independence, because independence is not static. Tomorrow someone joining the firm, his spouse or his relative as defined may have some key managerial position or may have invested somewhere, so that may jeopardize the independence of the firm or the ethical behavior. So now what is ethical behavior? Ethical behavior is doing the right thing at the right place. So ethical behavior is something that comes from the culture. We have to develop the right culture in the firm so that everyone knows what is ethically right and they follow what is it supposed to be. And this aspect of independence and ethics actually needs continuous training as well. Then monitoring. How do you monitor? You do some inspections, you ask for some of the demat accounts, you ask for some of the bank accounts and things like that, and then you kind of provide all the details, and then you verify, cross verify, and you are with your declaration. Also, you have to have a process for dealing with non-compliance. So it may be a disciplinary mechanism, monetary penalty at the first instance. If it is a major problem, then you may terminate the employee or ask for any additional things that are to be looked into as per the firm's policies and procedures. So that's about independence, and this is very important. If we look at any of the regulators report, for example, FRRB, QRB, NAFRA, any report, independence is so critical and so important that everyone pays a lot of attention to this, and everyone is evaluating this every day. So this has to be appropriately documented. So number one, we have to establish policies and procedures so that everyone who is supposed to comply is aware of, and everyone is doing their job right. That's requirement number one. And then requirement number two is basically that for that requirement actually has to enable the firm to communicate its independence to all the people. So it's not about making a policy and keeping it in the drawer or in a locker. It's about implementing it. It's about speaking to everyone and ensuring that we identify the relationship. So when we go to the client, we kind of ask them, what are your related parties? Then we check the previous year's financials. Then we check declarations by directors. Then we check and any other transaction that have been made. Then we check MCA records and things like that. And then we conclude, okay, this is the list of the related parties. So maybe we have to establish a policy and procedure which actually identifies where is the threat to independence. So I'm giving a statutory audit to a client, whether I can propose an internal audit, no. If it is a PIE, that is public interest entity, what are the services that I can do, whether it fits into Companies Act 144, it doesn't fit into Companies Act 144, banking regulation, any of my partner has any loan, NBFC, can some of the can I take some concessions on interest and things like that. So all these functions have to be considered, and that's what independence is about. The specific procedures required by SQC1 actually is like, it is applicable to the firm and the network firm. It has to be established appropriately. Personnel has to actually promptly notify. So in the beginning, I was independent, but during the year, there is an event that happened because of which I am non-compliant, or I think that I am in breach of independence, then I have to report, and then a course of action can be taken. One of the important things in Code of Ethics is that there are certain safeguards available for certain situations, and when the safeguards are not available or it is beyond a breach, then it is something that we can actually not do anything about it. Then accumulation and communication of information to personnel, so that firm and its personnel actually looks at it in totality and actually ensures that they are appropriately looked into by the relevant people. So independent breaches we spoke about, we have to have a policy that in case of there is any breach, there has to be a procedure like who will inform, what will be informed, how it will be informed. That's very necessary that we actually look into these matters. Communication by the above people to communicate back to the firm of the actions taken. Okay. Then appropriate action, how it comprises elimination of the independence threat requires. So we already require annual return compliance from the independence on the independence. Okay. The policy should also address the familiarity threat, which actually will mitigate the requisite thing, and we should be actually be able to look at it. Now SQC1 says that how do you reduce the familiarity threat? You should not be allowing any of the partner or the senior staff to be there above any of the above any of the PIE to be signed more than 7 years. So SQC1 requires not PIE, sorry, listed entity. If you are signing, if your senior partner or your senior your partner or your senior staff is actually signing or looking into the client for more than 7 years, that is something that will trigger a familiarity threat, and this is not allowed as per SQC1. So wherever you are continuously signing, in case of listed companies, you will have to have a mechanism to evaluate, and then you should not actually, ideally, you should not sign the 7th year. 7th year, someone else has to sign. That is the actually requirement for independence to avoid familiarity threat. Next, the most important thing, which is acceptance and continuance of client relationship and engagement. What is acceptance? So we do not accept every client that walks through our door or every client that comes from one of our friend or someone, but we have a criteria of evaluation of the background check. What are the things that we generally see? If I have to take an example, how do I do client acceptance? I check the background of the promoter, whether he is in some bad light. There are some news articles, so we do a criminal check. We may have some softwares for background check. Then we do a MCA check. Then look at the healthiness of the financial statements. Then we also look at the qualifications that are there, and things like that. So let me take a few of the examples. If for example, the audit report is heavily qualified or disclaimer of opinion provided by someone else, we may think twice before touching that client or before taking that client on board. Second criteria, maybe if there are lots of news about that client and there are already some cases going on or some litigations on or some regulatory actions on, then we will think whether it suits our risk appetite and whether we should be taking it. Okay, it's not about always charging a premium for the services that we are providing, but it's about doing the right decision also. What is our risk appetite and what is it that we want to take? Third case, maybe, if the promoters are in bad limelight and if a bad light, and if actually they are struggling to prove their case, and if there are regulatory and other ED, EOW kind of inquiries on them, then you may have to think again whether that is something that you want to look at or you don't want to look at. So all these things are actually encapsulated in the form of client acceptance. Now, what is it again about continuance? Continuance is about you have a standard checklist or you have a policy for client acceptance, for example. So that will have background checking of the firm, background of the company, background check of the promoters, litigations, cases, income tax assessments, any kind of aggressive accounting positions that are taken by the people, by the any of the company or any of the subsidiaries or anything, the group structure, which are the countries that are involved. There are certain countries where people don't want to do some work. If there are any sanctions, for example, latest US has got so much of sanctions on Russia, so maybe whether to work in such jurisdiction or not. So all this, and then if there is a politically connected party, whether I want to do the audit or not want to do that audit, all these are comprising of my client acceptance checklist. So once we fill in this client acceptance checklist and then we rate our, so generally what happens is when we fill this client acceptance checklist, you can come to a conclusion of this is a high risk client, low risk client, medium risk client, as the case may be. And then we accordingly either understand and put some safeguards that we have an additional reviewer, we need to do more consultations and things like that. And then we can take that client, or that doesn't suit our risk appetite, then we may consider leaving the client. Okay. And one of the other things that we have to consider is continuance. What happens? At the beginning of the year, you are accepted a client thinking that it is a low risk client. But during the year, that happened, there was a period, there was some issue in the client which actually is not appropriate. There was some major fraud in the client. Then we will have to evaluate whether you want to continue with that client or don't want to continue with that client. That's continuous. So practically speaking, we actually may not have a checklist, or we may not have policy, but then we all are aware of this and we all are doing this. And this is the exercise of professional skepticism that we do every day and based on which we take various decisions, right? So the only point that may be remaining is that documents. Where do I get again? Answer is SQC implementation, right? There is a standard checklist that is available. You can modify it, you can add few more things to it. You can make it more elaborate or at least base minimum follow that and then document all your client acceptance. Okay. That's about client acceptance and continuous. And then also, how do you actually check the system is working? System is working, control is working when it is detecting failures, right? So you will have some rejections also during the year. So you will have to ensure that you document those rejections. So in one of the sessions, someone asked me like, "Oh, is there client rejection also? Do you do that? Have you ever rejected a client?" So it's quite possible we can reject a client based on their risk profile or the complexity or something that is not suitable to us. For example, in India, today there are very few auditors who will accept audit of cryptocurrency because it's not a legalized currency as yet. We know that there is taxation applicable on it, but then it's not a legalized gaming company. So there are very less auditors who will accept an audit of gaming company because there is a lot of issues or there are a lot of matters involved in a gaming company. There may be some kind of money exchange, that is heavy money exchange that happens. Some typical industries always will have some typical issues. So firms may have, yeah. Means I can't understand. Echoing. Is it? I stop my video, so that should make the bandwidth better. Is that better now? Hello, is it clear now? Yeah, just 1 second. Let me share the screen. Yeah, you can see the screen. Yeah. So for better bandwidth, I'll just keep the video off as of now, and maybe at the end during the question, I'll switch it. Yeah. Yeah. So we are talking about client acceptance. So all these things you have to document in a checklist, and then that checklist maybe you would need to get it signed by whoever you nominate as the person who will actually look into these matters and actually will close into these matters. Yeah. So that is a procedure that everyone will have to follow without any without fail. Yeah. So acceptance of a change in the terms of audit engagement. This is what we talked about. If there is a lot of change in the engagement, then you have to reconsider whether you want to continue with your client or not as well. So this is one of the triggers based on which you will actually conclude whether you want to conclude with continue with the client or otherwise. And you have to document all these things. Acceptance and continuance of client relationships and engagements. You have to evaluate the firm's capability, competence, time and resources, whether you have adequate time, resources and things like that. Not only the background check and other matters of the company, You will have to look at your own capability, that whether you are able to do that work or not, whether you will be able to take up that work, whether you have the competency, whether you have the right people, whether you have time, whether you have resources and things like that, and whether you have experience with the relevant regulatory or the reporting requirements, and also the ability to gain necessary skills and knowledge, whether you are ready for it, and then you can take it. At times it so happens that the client is the engagement is remunerative and we want to take it, but then we can't take it unless we have adequate knowledge about the industry and also the capability and resources to fulfill the same. So all these matters may generally be complied with, but SQC now requires the ability to demonstrate compliance, and that is when we said that control will be working only when it is operative, and when it can reject something that is of bad quality. You need to have a rejection list also, because rejection is actually I can say a benchmark that your quality is working appropriately. So whatever is your basis, you will have to document and you will have to ensure that it is available. Firm also has to have a policy on withdrawal from an engagement. When to withdraw from an engagement? For example, you're repetitively making requests to the client for some data and nothing is available. Client is not holding board meeting. You are not able to sign the financial statement because board has not approved it. You are not left with anything. You are continuing with this situation for more than 1 year. Then maybe following the process of resignation of auditor and in guide that is available, which is issued by ICI there, then you should be able to withdraw from a client. If you actually come across a situation where there is a independence impairment, you should be able to withdraw a client. So you have to have a policy or you have to have a procedure as to how you will withdraw from a client also. If you have incurred too much of cost on a audit already, which is beyond limit and client is still delaying, you can think of withdrawing if there is nothing that is available or if there is the information is not adequately available. Now all this is subject to the resignation guidance that is issued by ICI. We have to go hand in hand, both has to go hand in hand, but there has to be a policy for withdrawal. There has to be a place to come out of something, and this is not a permanent fixture. So we have to actually have some mutual clauses. So when we make an engagement letter, one of the things that I've generally seen is that many people will not have a termination clause. So termination clause is actually subject to Companies Act, obviously. So you have to have some leeway and you have to write that it can be as per Companies Act and also following a certain procedure. So you can define a procedure there, which actually ends up in minimal disruption on both the sides. But then that doesn't mean we can left, right, and center resign from anything. This will always be in compliance with the ICI guide on resignation that is being issued. And we have to always have, if the size of the firm is medium, then we have to have a consultation policy. All these matters have to be consulted with more than one person so that, more brains the better, and we are able to come to an appropriate conclusion. Yeah. Human resources. The most important thing in every firm is human resources, for which most of us, there is a talent crunch also in the market. There's a lot of things that are actually we have to take into account, and we have to accordingly, take care of the human resources. So what is it about human resources? So human resources is number one. We have to have policies and procedures to have sufficient to have and also to ensure that the personnel with appropriate capabilities, competence, and commitment to ethical principles perform its engagements. How do you know capabilities? Obviously, you have to have detailing of every employee whom you have and the partner. Competence, you have to know what is the competence of each and every person. So when appointing, you will have a fixed JD, and then you will actually evaluate against the JD job description. People who are actually committed to ethical principles actually will have to be the part of the organization, because integrity is the last thing that you would actually like to lose on any part. what are the things that has to be covered in the HR policy? HR policy has to have a procedure for recruitment, a procedure for performance evaluation, procedure for competence and capability, and also the career development, promotion, and other parts, and also estimation of personnel needs. So there has to be a complete HR involvement. There has to be employee grooming program. There has to be some kind of, employee involvement, and also there has to be appropriate performance evaluations. There has to be proper recruitment policies and things like that. Now, the next question is, how do we have all this in medium-sized or a small firm? So I know that it is, it is a specific people and only a small group of people who will be driving all these things. But then there has to be certain things, base minimum things that have to be in writing, at least a 5-page policy or a 4-page policy, something that is evaluated, and a fixed appraisal form and things like that. How do you develop capabilities and competence? That's through professional education, continuing CPD, that is attending various programs. We understand that not everyone is able to conduct trainings within their firm. So please ask people to subscribe for any of these CPD programs. That institute has so much of webinars and so much of seminars conducted. After this COVID-19 era, there is so much of online and webinar things that happen. That there can be, you can search for the topic and you will get it. It can be essay, it can be ISA, it can be international standards also, and it can be any kind of accounting standards, Ind AS, IFRS, US GAAP, anything you want, you will get as a webinar or something that is arranged by our institute or some other prominent institutes across the globe. So you can register anywhere and you can actually start attending. So there's no dearth of material, there is no dearth of learning, but we have to ensure that our staff are actually on a continuous learning mode so that they comply with all these policies, and they are more competent and they are capable. When we talk about staff capabilities, the only thing that I always keep mentioning is that all of us, maybe it is like 20 years of experience for me, someone else some other number of years, we all of us have to stay relevant. If we have to stay relevant, then we have to learn every day. So I think that applies to each one of us being in this profession, and that only can keep us staying afloat, right? So human resources is when performance evaluation, compensation, promotion, as we discussed in the first element, all this will have to be related to quality. And also all this has to be held high, because in terms of the competence and commitment of ethical principles have to be held high, because that will be something that will be necessary from an ethical behavior perspective also. The policy also has to state that its personnel are aware of its expectation. So you have to make aware, like, what are you supposed to do? You can't be doing anything and everything. So you have to mention who is supposed to do what. In case of career development, there has to be some opportunities, and also how do you advance to higher levels, and what are the things that you can do in certain matters. All those things have to be there. Also, in terms of human resources, one of the things is assignment of engagement team. Who is assigned to which audit? How is it determined? If it is a complex audit, if it is a cement industry audit, who is doing it? If it is a bank audit, who is doing it? A person who is experienced in manufacturing may not be the right person to do a bank audit. Person who is actually more experienced in an insurance audit, it may not be the right person to do a manufacturing audit. Though audit is an audit and we all have capabilities, then that doesn't mean that we can do anything and everything. We have to ensure that we have the right skill sets. If we have the right skills, then maybe we can do both, but then we have to stay relevant, and we have to have that competence and capability, and also we have to we have to allocate people according to it. There has to be something that will be written which will say that how do I assign my engagement team members, how do I understand their experiences, how do I understand that what are the things that they are good at and what are the things that they are not good at, then professional standards, regulatory legal requirements, applicable technical knowledge, and all these things will be relevant. For example, if you're doing a audit of a bank, then you have to know the latest RBI circulars, you have to know the format of the financial statements, you have to know what is going on in the industry. You have to know compliance with the bank guidance note, bank auditing guidance note, and things like that. So you have to be having relevant industry knowledge. And then also he has to be able to apply the professional judgment and obviously the understanding of the firm's SQC. That is goes without saying, actually. Then we come to the next element, which is actually talking about the engagement performance. Now we set up so the tone at the top is right. There is a good amount of ethical and independence policies, and then there's a good client acceptance procedure. Then we have told the staff what is supposed to be done. Having done all that, then the next step that we expect is that the engagement has to be performed in the appropriate manner. So till now, if we have to say, so 1, 2, 3, 4, we can say we were doing design and implementation in terms of IFC. We were designing and implementing the things. Now, when we come to engagement performance, when we pick up an engagement and then do a review, that is when it is test of detail, you can say, test of control, you can say, how well is the system working, operating effectiveness. So basically, operating effectiveness of the control happens when you test an engagement. So we told, we talked about who is responsible for quality. Say Mr. A is responsible in the firm. Then there is ethics policy, and then independence declarations are supposed to be taken for every engagement. Everyone has to stay independent. Third is proper people are put on the job, and everyone knows that what they are supposed to do. There is a proper client acceptance policy. Everyone has followed the checklist and everything. Now, what is expected? All these things have to be reflected on the engagement. How? When we talk about placing more importance to quality by the tone at the top, whatever policies that they have implemented have to be seen in the file. Second is most important, which is actually client acceptance. So whether the client is rightly accepted, not accepted, rejected is something that has to be documented on the file. So we talked about a checklist, and then when we come to engagement performance, that checklist has to be documented on the file. Then the third thing that we spoke about is right people on the job. So this is a bank audit, for example, they have to have people with the right experience or who have gained some learning over it, and then that is to be demonstrable. Then we talked about personnel also, and then in the personnel we talked about, they have to be given appropriate training and things like that. So that is also necessary to be looked into. So a combination of all this, and then when we have the right people, then they have to do the right job. So if I have advances as a line item in the bank, or if I have interest income, or in case of a manufacturing, if it is a manufacturing company with a complicated inventory production process, I should know how to value WIP. I should know how to value closing stock and things like that, and I should be able to document those things appropriately. So that's about engagement performance. You may have various forms, you may have various standard practices. So people may have standard templates for actually engagement letter. They can have standard templates for all the kinds of appointment formalities, some planning strategy, identification of risk and control, documentation of this risk and control. Then there can be a planning overview template or a planning strategy template that we generally call. Then there are various working papers. For PP, you will have a separate working paper. For advances, you will have a separate working paper. For revenue, under 115, you will have a separate working paper. Under 9, you will have a separate working paper, so on and so forth. So all those templates are followed. Everything is properly documented. Everything is properly discussed as well, and everything actually goes through the channel of, say, if there is an engagement quality control reviewer who is required, then engagement quality control reviewer is also appointed. Let us talk about engagement quality control reviewer. Who is the engagement quality control reviewer? Now, SQC1 talks about you can have an engagement quality control reviewer based on your firm's policy and risk appetite. So for all listed company, at a minimum, you are supposed to have a quality control reviewer. So who is a quality control reviewer? He is independent of the engagement. He is not a person who will actually directly interact with the client. He is someone who will actually sit at the back and who will question the engagement partner or support the engagement partner, or actually look at it independently and review the work that is done by the team and ensure that there are compliance with the policies, procedures, and firms' policies, procedures as well. That's the role of the engagement quality control reviewer. Consultation. What is consultation? So if there are contentious matters, if there are difficult matters, if there are actually aggressive accounting standard positions, or if there are too much of things, then don't keep things to yourself. Maybe you consult one more person within the firm. You nominate a person and you actually get the things done from them, and actually you actually consult them for the contentious stands. So how does the consultation work? Say, for example, I want to do a qualification for one of my client. I'm not sure whether this qualification, this language is appropriate, not appropriate. So what do? I consult within my firm who has an experience around this, or I have nominated person with whom I can consult. I can ask them like, this is my view, what is your view? They can actually look at independently, and then they can confirm or they see that, or they provide guidance saying that this is not the appropriate consultation or appropriate stand taken or something, and then that helps. Also, every firm has to have a consultation policy, and then there are firms with specialized consultation desk, technical desk, and things like that. Now, two of the things are very important here for consultation as well as EQCR. So both of these things, if the firm, if it is a proprietary firm or if it is a small partnership firm, they can take help from another firm also. So EQR function being outsourced, review being done by someone else is a common thing that we are seeing more and more. And also the consultations being outsourced, and then that is being taken help of is something that we are seeing quite often. These are the two things that are happening very much. So this is about entire engagement performance. And one of the other things within the engagement performance is very important, which is actually timely documentation, and also the protection of the data and the confidentiality, and also assembling of the file. One of the things that is stated under the engagement performance in SQC1 is that you are supposed to archive all your files within 60 days of the audit report sign-off. And also you're supposed to retain all the documents up to 7 years that we know as per the ICA announcement. What is archival of document? Archival of document is nothing but you're putting it into a shelf and not touching it after 60 days. So you have a combination of things that is possible here. One, if the firm is using a tool should have a facility that it should be able to archive. So if things are getting archived at a certain time, then it is actually easier within the tool, and then that has to have some trail, and it should not be something that is actually editable even after 60 days till whatever number of year, and it should only be retrieved whenever asked for, and they should not be tampering with any of the data. So if you have seen NFRA reports and things like that, they have spoken elaborately about how data should be maintained and how there should be not be any editing to the data. The next thing that we talk about assembly of files is the soft copy. Many of the people who doesn't have tool, but then because of the bulkiness of the data, they maintain it on soft copy basis also. So when you maintain it on soft copy basis, there is always a possibility that someone goes there and tries to open some file. And even if you press a space bar also by mistake, then it also amounts to edit. So one of the things that you have to do is that within 60 days or immediately on 60th day, you are supposed to make all the files that are relevant for that audit as read-only, and no one should be able to edit it at any point in time. Third combination is you have in hard copy. So ensure that you print it, you index it, you put it everything together, and then you put it into the shelf, and don't touch it till whatever time. And whenever data is asked for, you will retrieve it from there. Fourth is combination of tool plus hard copy or soft copy plus hard copy, which is quite possible. So if you have a combination of this, internally crisscross cross-reference, and also ensure that you maintain log of all those things, and you ensure that all this data, either in hard copy, soft copy, stays archived or read only after the 60th day. This is very important, and this is something that is very seriously seen by all the regulators. All said and done, you have a beautiful file, you have complied with all the policies and procedures, you have written everything that is pertaining to the file, but then if it is not archived within time, then your entire file fails. So nothing can save, and then everything is gone back. And it is already a completely gone case in case of in the eyes of any regulator. Anything done beyond 60 days is not allowed at all. We all know that even UDI generation can be done only up to 60 days and not beyond. So all this go hand in hand, and that's why it is very, very important to understand these things. And SQC1 has a lot of application guidance and implementation things. So you have to ensure that you comply with all these requirements. So please look at the implementation guide. So basically, what is engagement performance? Engagement performance actually looks at how engagement teams are briefed on understanding the work objective, who is the senior, how do they review, what are the things that they look at, and how actually they are closing on these matters. That is one thing to look at for sure. Second thing is what is the process for complying with standards? So what are the standards? Schedule 3, SA, standards of audit, standards of accounting standards, I mean, Ind AS, IFRS, whatever. All these things are very important. So you may have to have relevant documentation on the file with respect to the same. You need to have a checklist, for example, and you should document all these checklists. So if you see your QRB questionnaire, peer review questionnaire, then one of the things that is asked is whether the firm has a checklist in place, whether the firm has standardized documents in place, whether the firm has a letter of representation in place. So all these formats, if you make it at one place, so it comes quite handy and it is helpful for everyone, right? Then processes for engagement supervision. Who reviews? When does he review? What does he review? What are his footprints? Where is it written that who has reviewed? What is the timestamp, date stamp if you have an audit tool? And if you don't have audit tool, how do you ensure that he has reviewed? And what are the footprints that you see? If it is signed by him, not signed by him, what were the review remarks that were given? All these things become very necessary. And the timing of the review, whether it is being appropriately reviewed. For example, planning is reviewed in the month of January, February, signing is reviewed in the month of entire work is reviewed in the month of May, March, April, and then signing in the month of May, for example, in case of listed company. All this becomes very important. Then training of the staff, we talked about training. So providing training in-house or extensively outside, making them attend some training sessions, maintaining attendance records, all these are also coming in engagement performance, and it also ensures compliance with HR policies also. Methods of work review, it may be online review, offline review together. Then there are significant judgments. How does these judgments made? Then actually important area reviews and documentation. For example, revenue, estimate, inventory, advances in case of bank, premium in case of reinsurance, IBNR, IBNR in case of actuarial, things like that. So there are lots of areas which need attention, and these areas are critical, and these areas have to be appropriately documented. Then the next thing, appropriate work, documentation of work performed. So we have to go by a principle that if work is not documented, then it is not done. So if work is not done, then there is nothing to show. So basically, if work is done, it has to be written down. Whatever we are thinking has to be inked down. If there is no link between what we think and ink, it is never going to be a win-win situation. So whatever we think has to be inked properly. And the last but not the least, how the policies and procedures are updated and kept current, and how are they actually looking at the things on an overall basis. Then the next thing is what we have to look at is that supervision policies and how the engagement progress is tracked, and competencies within the term. How do they actually address significant issues? How do they identify consultation matters? And also how are the review responsibilities determined on the basis that more experienced engagement team members are providing insights, sharing their experiences, making the know-how and things like that. Okay, so most of the requirements we have tried to cover here and try to articulate here, but then, there may be some challenges that may arise in terms of how are these demonstrated. Okay, one of the things is that you may have very good policies, but then you should be able to demonstrate on how these things are being done. And that can be done by various means, like, sign off of hard copy working paper, sign off, making the things read only, and things like that. All these aspects of engagement performance are actually covered in various standards of auditing. If I have to take few examples, if we talk about SA 505, we know that an entire physical inventory verification procedure is provided, confirmation procedure is provided, and things like that. And it gives all full details of how it is to be done. So that is the area that you will pick up, and then you will have some guidance on documentation. Then you will have another area, for example, risk. So SA 315 talks about risk and control, how to identify risk, how to identify control, how to put it up, and how to actually document within the file. All these things are elaborated there. So on and so forth. Each of these elements are very much covered in each of the SA. And here in SQC1, all it is talking about is actually you have to ensure that everything is properly documented here within a file. And that amounts to engagement performance. So when we talk about peer review or the QRP, one of the things that they do is first they look at the checklist, then they look at the policies and procedures, then they look at the implementation, and the fourth thing that they will look at is some of the files, right? QRP will have only one file which is specifically picked up, and peer review will have a sample of files, right? So when we have these things, then we will have to actually ensure that the file ensures that you will have all these things appropriately provided for. So all these things ensure that your engagement performance goes right, and that's how your ensure compliance with quality standards are actually complied with, right? Consultation, we spoke about consultation. You can have a policy for consultation of contentious matter, aggressive accounting standard, modification of audit report. There are various things for which you can actually consult. So there are multiple things for which you can consult, but then you should ensure that your consultation is a policy has the parameters, and your consultation policy actually tallies with what you want to speak about. So, and the consultation is also appropriately documented. So I can't consult verbally and say I have consulted. There has to be a written procedure, email or something that you will document, and then you will have those criteria to cover all these things. Yeah. Differences of opinion. There are possibility. We spoke about EQR. So he's also a partner. I'm also a partner. So there can be differences of opinion, or I am the engagement partner. I have the team who is also a chartered accountant. There are also chartered accountants there. So I can have a difference of opinion. How do I resolve the difference of opinion? So maybe in the consultation policy, you have to have a thing to address any kinds of differences of opinion, and who resolves the differences of opinion. It's not that I'm more senior, so I'm supposed to be right and you are supposed to be wrong. It's not right. So we have to have some policies to ensure that differences of opinion are appropriately taken care of and are appropriately documented. And these differences of opinion have to be documented in form of consultation or otherwise. So what is the conclusion reached? What is the basis of such conclusion? And what do you do in case of difference of opinion? Those are the things that you should have in file. EQCR, we spoke about EQCR. It's a process to provide objective evaluation before the report is issued. So EQCR has to provide his views. He has to review the working papers of important areas, has to look into the planning, has to look into the financial statements to be delivered, and he has to reach to a conclusion so that it helps in formulating the report. Okay. And he is a person other than the EP. He can be, some other person in case of if it is a smaller firm. And also he has to ensure that, the independence of the EQCR is also important. So there has to be appropriate independence that is applicable to him. So as per SQC1, only listed companies need to have EQR, and other than that, firm can decide whatever is. It can be turnover based, it can be fees based, any criteria that you want to choose. So you have to set out a criteria here. The documentation of EQCR's involvement is very, very important. If you look at QRB report, if you look at NFRA report, it all talks about footprints of EP and EQCR. What does that mean? There has to be adequate footprints of EP as well as EQCR. That means that you have to show that you were present there. So the firm can make some policies like these are the minimum documents that the EQR can sign off. It can set out when the EQCR should get involved, what are the matters which he has to mandatorily look into. It's already there in SQC1. In addition to that, if they want to add anything, so he has to basically there throughout the file. He has to be there a part of the planning in reviewing, say, materiality, in reviewing important decisions taken, in reviewing whether planning strategy, in looking at how the various important matters are discussed, in looking at previous year's brought forward points and things like that. So that's very important. Then throughout the engagement in critical area, documentation, say revenue, inventory, and all this stuff, he has to review. And then if there are any critical issues, closing issues, then he has to review those also and come to appropriate conclusion. And he has to ensure that, he has to sign off before the signing of the audit report. He has to provide his clearance. And if there is any difference of opinion, that has to be properly dealt with, right? So firm has to have a policy of EQCR, which type of engagements that it will be applicable to. Also, what is the criteria for engagement quality reviewer? So he can be a person of this much experience, this industry, something of that sort. And then documentation requirements for the firm as well. So we spoke about nature, timing, extent, and all this. So I have put down each of those things more in detail, just for understanding. Yeah. Then criteria for EQCR, firm's policies has to address what should be the criteria. If there are, for example, major qualifications, then you can go for it based on what is the objectivity of the EQCR, and also on the basis of turnover and various things. And also who can be an EQCR, there can be a criteria that can be very much applicable. And this function is something that I have seen being outsourced because the firms are smaller and they do not have the expertise, so someone else can obviously help them. Documentation, we spoke about footprints of EQCR has to be very much visible there. When we talk about engagement performance, we spoke about work that is not documented is not done. So engagement documentation is very much a critical part of the entire engagement. We already spoke about this. Everything has to be archived within 60 days. That is made read-only within 60 days. The confidentiality, custody, integrity, accessibility, retrievability, all this has to be demonstrable and properly maintained. Whatever form the documentation is in, hard copy, soft copy, electronic, integrity cannot be compromised. And that is why it is very important to maintain the integrity of the file. Determination of when and by whom the engagement documentation was created, changed, and reviewed is most important, and that should be appropriately documented at all times. To protect its integrity, we have to have some kind of a software, or you have to make it read-only. So there are some simple softwares also available which can lock the folders. So there can be a locker within your laptop or in your server that you can create, and within 60 days you can actually put the folders into the locker, so that becomes automatically read-only. So that's also possible. Prevent any unauthorized changes, do not allow access other than for reference purposes, and also retention up to 7 years, and ownership of documentation is with the firm. Then we come to the last element, which is monitoring. We spoke about everything, setting up the policy, procedure, performance of the engagement. Now we come to monitoring. What is monitoring? We have to monitor at all times that all these things that we put in place and we have beautifully designed actually exists. So this is the ultimate test of control, or the operating effectiveness control for all the things that we have put in place. So if client acceptance policy is there, whether that is being followed. So when we pick up an engagement, we have to see whether client acceptance is being followed, whether the right people are allocated to the job, whether EQ or CR is actually doing his work, whether he is documenting his work. So all these include monitoring. How do you do monitoring? Something called as a cold review. What do you do? There are two types of reviews. One is hot review, one is cold review. Hot review means when the engagement is on, you go along the file and then you check all these things. Also from the policies and procedures, you take samples and check for functional area assessment. What do I call by functional area assessment? We spoke about HR system, for example. So when we talked about HR system, two of the things we said that, few of the things that we said is that joining, whether the procedure for joining is happening properly, procedure for performance evaluation, whether that is happening properly. Then, for leaving, whether the appropriate deactivation and other things are happening properly. Those are functional area assessments, and also client acceptance, whether it is being done and things like that. Then you have to actually look at the entire engagement performance. So select a file and look at each and every step-by-step approach to the file, and also ensure that the teams follow all the policies and procedures that are issued by the firm. Few of the firms have a dedicated internal inspection team. They will keep reviewing the files 365 days and they will keep actually giving input to everyone. This is another function, again, can be done by someone else and not necessarily has to be within the firm. This is something that actually people have started giving out, and then they get quality out of, other people's comments. So you have to monitor every aspect that you have put in place. So this is called as, this is something called as, how does it work? So at the end of the year, you pick up an engagement and also you pick up few of the samples from each of the aspects that we discussed. You look at the files and also those aspects like HR and other things that we gave example. Then you do a review and you appoint the reviewers basically within the firm or from outside the firm. You review the file and then also look at all the requirements of professional standards plus the policies and procedures of the firm. Then you come up with a list of findings. Then you finalize the findings. Maybe you want to grade them as high, low, medium. Depending on the number of high, low, medium, then you create a grading of the file, which is called as satisfactory, unsatisfactory, or areas good to accept and many areas to improve or something like that, whatever things you can have. So generally people have 3 gradings or 4 gradings or max 5 gradings. So this is common. So then you grade the files, and then based on that performance of quality, partner and the entire engagement team will be subject to, if the file is good, a reward, and if the file is not good, then maybe some reprimand or some action or some hot review in the next year or some 2 files review in the next year, whatever is the quality deterrent that you all have put in place. Now, what do you do out of it? You have the inspection findings, then you don't sit with it. One, compare it with the local regulatory guidances that are actually FRRB, QRB, NFRA findings. Map it and how good are you or how bad are you in that in terms of the observation. Then what do? You actually send it out to everyone, hold a session, maybe hold a training to say that these are the places where we are going wrong to all the partners and staff. And then you can tell them these are the places where we can improve. And then let's not make the issues next time. Also, what do? Try to find out what were the reasons for these, mishaps. Basically, and so that is called as root cause analysis. And you do the root cause analysis, and then you come to a conclusion, these are the things, or these are the loopholes, or these are the problems in the policies, and these are the new things that I have to do, and then you fix up the time. Again, you go back to implementation, again you go back to monitoring, and then that cycle keeps going forever. And then that's the entire monitoring piece, the way it is there. If I have to evaluate with IFC, as I started with the IFC as the funder, this is management. So till now it was management testing, and this is something that is actually the management testing of IFC. So if this is management testing of IFC, what is statutory auditors testing of IFC? That is QRB or the peer review. That's how we can equate. So we have to have a policy for monitoring. We have to ensure that reviewers are selected. We have to ensure what is the periodicity of selection of partners if we have more partners. or the engagements. We have to have sampling of the engagements. We have to review many of the files, and then we have to come up with observation, and then we have to educate our people and also grade the file. Okay, and that is how it goes on. It depends on the size of the firm, how many offices they have, results of previous monitoring activity, nature and complexity of firm's practice, and things like that. Okay, and this is one of the areas where few of the firms are taking some external help because they're not able to look at all these things. So this is again a very crucial piece of the entire AQMM, and how your monitoring piece works, how your inspection works, and how your regulators inspection matches with some of these things. So one of the things that in NFRA inspection guidelines, it is said that they will also look at how is your internal inspection policy, and then they will also benchmark from your findings as to how good are your findings as vis-a-vis their findings. Then we will also look at, whether you have to need some improvements in your own policies. And then there are remedial actions as we spoke about, and then there is a closure of the file and also improvements to the next year's files. There is another aspect which is complaints and allegations. It's obvious that if we are running some firm, there may be some complaints, there may be some allegations by employees, outsiders, vendors, customers, and even from some of the outside people. So we need to have a policy for ensuring, how to handle these complaints, allegations. Maybe few of it need legal help also. So we need to have a continuous interactive policy, how to ensure that these concerns are appropriately addressed, and we should know that what are the things that we have to have. Ultimately, coming to documentation of SQC, ensure you go through implementation guide of SQC1, ensure you read it thoroughly, go to the appendix or the guidance. You will get a lot of policies. You can replicate few of them for your own benefit. There are few checklists like client acceptance checklist, assignment of engagement, team checklist, and there are various things that are available. So make use of it appropriately. You can create your own documentation steps. You will have various references also available from which you can make your own documentation deck, some standard working papers, letter of representations, engagement letters, and things like that. Ensure your file is appropriately archived on time, and then this entire system of quality control, you ensure that you revisit it at every possible time, and then you keep enhancing it and ensure that you are compliant with quality at all the times. Now coming to difference between SQC1 and SA220, we all talked about is SQC1, that is the firm level thing that why everyone will have to follow. Difference is only that it's verbatim same, except that it has to be at every engagement level. All these elements have to be covered in the engagement level. That's all. There's no much differences. And that's all I have to share today. I think if you have any questions, happy to take the questions. Please note that whenever you have any kind of review, your set of policies and procedures and various versions, one of the things that I forgot to mention is that when you change any policies, procedures, ensure that you actually document the version numbers and also put down as to what is the latest version. You need to keep a track of different years. For example, if your review pertains to 1920, you need to have the set of policies for 1920, 2021 as the case may be. So you need to maintain that log and you need to have those policies, because we keep improvising every now and then, and it is very necessary for us to maintain that log. That's about SQC1 as well as SA220. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a wonderful deliberation. You have covered both these standards in a very elusive manner and very detailed manner. I have received certain questions from the members. If you
Sure.
permit, can I raise those queries, ma'am?
Please, please.
Ma'am, first query is regarding the concept of test checking in an audit of large scale concern vis-a-vis maintenance of audit working papers.
Yeah. So concept of test checking in large, so today is the world of data analytics, if I have to speak, honestly. So less than test checking, it's more of everything checking is something that is the trend that is more and more emerging because of the data analytics and availability of various tools and technologies in this regard. So substantive analytics is something that can help you very much. Now, when we talk about test check, obviously we cannot check 100% and audit still exists on the basis of test check. So one of the important things that one has to look at is how do you actually do the test check? What is the basis? So our IFC guidance note for test of control already has a sampling sheet. We can follow that for TOC sampling. For substantive testing, for selection of samples and all, we can use the calculators that are available in Excel and things like that. There is also a formula in your sampling, standard, which you can make use of. But then whatever you are doing, you are supposed to document it properly. If you have an Excel, please document it, and also the selection of sample. Which one are you selecting? I think one of the things that majority of people do is top 10, top 5, top 6. That's not enough. Our sample has to be stratified. It has to cover high value, low value, mid value, zero value, negative value items also. So we have to stratify samples to ensure that it covers all the types of samples in all the types of the population or variation of the population within the sample. And you have to take the right sample so that you have to be compliant.
Yes,
what's the other piece of the question? I forgot.
Ma'am, it was test checking in an audit of large scale concern.
Yeah.
Maintenance audit working papers.
Maintaining audit working papers. Yeah, maintaining audit working papers. If you're talking about large scale audit, then definitely it's not possible to maintain it in hard copy. So I would suggest like you can maintain in tools or in Excel sheet or some storage media. But then one of the things that you have to ensure is that there may be multiple versions. Ensure that you clean it up within the archival period. And ensure that you store the final copies, and then use simple documentation, things like locker or document locker, or file archival locker and things like that. There are few softwares available, or a simple access to make the entire set of files read only. Zip it and then make it read only.
Ji madam. Madam, what are the important quality control mechanism for audit of financial institutions like banks and merchant bankers, because bank audit is around the corner? So what precautions or what quality control checks has to be done while auditing the bank branch?
Yeah. One of the things that you have to have, like apart from all the standard requirements, like, you have the planning strategy, you have which controls you will check and all that stuff. Very important two things I would like to touch upon in case of any kind of regulatory driven audit, maybe bank or insurance or any kind of regulatory driven audit. Number one, look at all the regulatory inspections and proceedings of previous years or whatever years, and the various questions that have been asked by the regulator. Make a list of it and also a strategy on how you are going to test it and how it is going to impact your current financial statements. That's very, very important. That's step one. Step two, which is very important again, is you should know all your important circulars. You should know all your important regulations, and you should be able to have a checklist, and it has to be documented in the form of compliance with those things, and you should be able to identify if there are non-compliances. Apart from all the things that we discussed, these are the two most important and critical things. And the third one, which is obviously applicable not only to bank audit but to everyone, is all the discussions with all kinds of management as well as the TCWG. So those charged with governance, maybe audit committee, board committee, branch head, whoever, management as well as TCWG, documentation of those things is very, very important. And it has to be demonstrable. It should not be one way, but it should be demonstrable. So you have to maintain records, logs of discussion with TCWG as well. So always remember these three things. regulatory inspection, summary of it, how we are addressing in the financial statements, the compliance checklist, and the third one, communication with the TCWG, apart from everything that we have discussed.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, are SQC mandatory for all audit assurance firms, and when? From when?
SQC is in effect from 2009, and if you are providing any kind of assurance service, audit services, SRS, that is review services, then SQC is mandatory. And it is like this, that if you are doing audit, do quality audit, and quality can be ensured only by quality control standards, so it's applicable.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, in case of the proprietorship concern, there are certain problems where entire leadership, monitoring, person responsible for implementation, etc., are vested within the proprietor only. Is that okay? Since there are no other CA in the firm.
Yeah, I understand that, and that is when at few of the places I touched upon that few of the functions are actually outsourced by smaller firms or proprietary firms, or people having 2 to 3 partners only. So EQR function. So I cannot be the EP and the EQR. So I cannot be the maker and the checker. So if I am EP, though someone else has to be EQCR. So if I don't have someone in the firm, then I will have to outsource it. IIP function, I cannot monitor myself. So maybe I can outsource this thing. So these are the things that one can do to ensure consultation. I can't do consultation with myself. So maybe I have to take help of another expert in the system or outside the system. So I will have to take help of someone else, because I can't do everything alone.
Ma'am, in case while your presentation, you have touched upon AQMM, audit quality maturity model.
Yes.
And I hope it is affected. It is affected from 1st April 2023 onwards. So how can we measure and award marks for many closely held private limited companies?
Closely held private limited companies. So it is not based on your company to company audit. It is for the firm again. So if you have the system of quality control up and running appropriately, you will get maximum marks. So the requirement of AQMM is that you have to have the policies and it has to be implemented also. It is not that you can make the policies and sit. It has to be implemented and it has to be working before 31st of March 2023. I would like to share an instance where we were discussing with one of acquaintances friend, and they said that okay, by 31st March we'll make all the policies. So if you read it appropriately, it's not about making all the policies. It has to be implemented and it has to be working before 31st of March for you to get those things. So if whatever is the size of the practitioner that you are supposed to ensure that you have adequate quality control policies and procedures, and that they are working as well.
One question is relating to this, relating to the HR. In many organizations, HR team is a one-member team. In such cases, there is any stipulated norms mandated to be agreed upon? If yes, when and what frequency?
So HR team may be of one person, but then whatever function that person is doing, he has to be aware of. If he needs some help, then he will have to, another partner within the firm or someone else within the firm can help them also. The policies and procedures, if you look at that implementation guide, you will be able to, look at appropriately, and you will be able to appreciate and understand that these are the things that one has to do. And when you look at those things, you will be able to, comprehend as to what is the HR function and how much has to be done. So it is not about setting up the HR function. It is about how it is working. So for example, the promotion or the performance evaluation. How did you give promotion to someone has to be justifiable. It's like, so if a quality control system is working appropriately and everyone gives value to quality, people with good quality has to get promoted and rewarded, for example. And people who deliver not good quality will have to be reprimanded or will have to be subject to disciplinary action, whatever. So if it is happening reverse, that's a very clear indication that for quality control procedure is not working. So to what extent it depends on size of the firm, nature of the firm, complexity of the firm. But then at all times it is not same or standard. If the firm is having 1,000 people, then the what do you say? The operations of scale are quite different. If there are 10 people in the firm, you know everyone by name, you know everyone what they are doing. So the dynamics are different. So you will have to, it depends on case to case. Any other question? Hello?
Ma'am, is there any format prescribed for partnership firm for presentation and preparation of financial statements, or the T format is acceptable?
No. Technical guide on non-corporate entities are already published by SCI, and it is available in Excel also. So you're supposed to use it because that's already there for partnership firm and for LLPs also. Two different guides are there. So please use it. For proprietary and partnership firm, there is one guide, and then for this thing, there is another format.
Last question. EQCR is applicable for bank branch audit also, or not?
It depends on the risk appetite of your firm. If you want to make it applicable, it can be, but mandatorily by ICI, it is only listed company. So I believe if you're doing a listed company bank branch audit and that is the only bank branch audit of your firm, then you should have an EQCR. Now it depends on your risk appetite and your firm's policy. But if you are a listed company auditor, then you should definitely have.
Fine, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now we come to an end. You have covered both these standards in a very detailed manner. We have gained a lot. Hope our members have also gained a lot in SQC1 as well as SA220. And once again, on behalf of AASB of ICI, I extend my heartiest thanks towards you for sparing your valuable time and acceding to our request for this particular webinar. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity, and thanks everyone for the patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Namaste.